Hello and welcome to the ET Global Town Hall. In this session, Democratization of Small Businesses, I'm going to explore how the small businesses are shaping up post-pandemic and what is it that needed to be done on the policy fronts on the business front. To get the real diverse perspective, we have speakers from 3 different regions. This will help us to understand how different countries are looking at small businesses differently. And let me introduce to my speakers to you. My speakers for this session are Daniel Yu, the founder and global CEO, Sokowatch, Kenya. Daniel, glad to have you.
Thanks for having me.
My next speaker is Ms. Naomi Karmi, the CEO of HiveMind Israel. Naomi, glad to have you.
Thank you for inviting me, Amol.
Thank you, Naomi. And my next speaker is Mr. Thomas Krogh Jensen, the CEO of Copenhagen FinTech region, Denmark. Thomas, glad to have you as well.
And thank you for inviting.
So Daniel, Naomi, and Thomas, I have a couple of questions, few specific questions and few common questions. So let me start with the common question for all of you. And Daniel, I will start with you. So the common question that I have for all of you is, how are the small businesses shaping up in your region, specifically after the pandemic?
Yeah, it's a really critical question with today's economy and just all the transformation that we've seen, especially for me being based out of Kenya in East Africa. Of course, the vast majority of the economy in Africa is in the informal sector. And so these are businesses that did not have a safety net. They did not receive government stimulus or really benefit from really any direct government policies over the past year and a half. It was really kind of all left on them to figure out what to do. And I think what we've seen is an incredible resilience, incredible innovation just happening spontaneously, where businesses have found means to digitize, using channels, such as Facebook, WhatsApp, but doing this all on their own, not through any type of policy per se. And I think it's really important that as the small businesses start to adopt digital channels, that governments not start to throw up barriers in the way of it, that they should treat this as a very positive development for the long-term economy and not see that as an opportunity, especially in an age where unfortunately a lot of these governments are cash strapped as a result of the economic hit over the past year and a half, to not suddenly see the surge in the digital economy as an opportunity to start to grab a lot of money from it just as it's starting to take off.
Okay, copied your points. Daniel, I will move my focus to Naomi now. Naomi, what is your opening remarks?
In Israel, we can see first and foremost at all times that we're very strong at very, very, very little businesses, like tiny businesses, even one-man show businesses, because the market is tiny. And on the other hand, we can see a huge startup boom that began like 2 decades ago and keep on booming. So instead of a spectrum, we have a spectrum with very, very divided strong points. And the COVID pandemic gave us a huge digital boost. We used to say, I'm coming from digital marketing, and we used to say that Israel is a decade behind the US. And now we say that we're 5 years after the US, because the year and a half of pandemic kind of shrunk the 10 years into 5. And we see a huge digital boom because a lot of businesses understood that they need this digital presence. And that contributes to a huge exporting boom, because once you go digital, you can start exporting your goods to other countries. And this is really something that booms right now.
That's meaningful, Naomi. I will move my focus to Thomas now. Thomas, how's the situation in Denmark? How are the small businesses shaping up there?
So it's a really good question. I think we need to start discussing what is small businesses, right? Because if you look at the numbers, that varies from one person up to 250 person, right? And it's very, very different challenges and opportunities in that segment. I come from the startup world, and most of those startups are very digital. I'm in financial technology, so most of that is very digital born, and they're thriving. They basically have the time of their life. So that's really good. But I think if you look at the vast majority of small businesses, and if you look at Denmark, the Nordics and the European numbers, I would say like 99% of businesses in Europe are small and medium-sized businesses, right? So below 250 employees. And if you look at in general at some of the challenges there, I would say actually right now we can see talent. So actually getting access to talent, and that's very much digital talent. So talent is a huge challenge for these businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, and that's not startups. So that's mom and pop shops. That is like ordinary, all different kinds of industries. That is really looking for talent. So that's one thing. I think if you look and there's various reports that substantiate that claim that also if you, especially in Denmark, but also in the rest of Europe, if you look at small businesses, they are all struggling with digitalization, going digital and digitizing their business, right? So struggling with being more efficient, struggling with competition, new entrants, disruption in whatever area they're in. And then obviously the third point, I think, is that there is something around like financing and investing in future growth. And obviously COVID was a big factor in that. Of course, there was different relief packages coming out of Denmark, the Nordics, rest of Europe, and they need to be paid back, right? So I think that's the jury is still very much out on how is that gonna go in the future for small and medium-sized businesses when the bill have to be paid.
Okay, I think you highlighted 2-3 very valid points. In fact, I'm going to add that as some specific questions going ahead in this discussion, specifically about the credit and the government policies. But since now we are discussing, the democratization of the small businesses, the immediate question that everybody, has specifically when we speak about the small businesses is the challenges they face. Pandemic was one of the major challenges, but obviously in all the countries, government kinds of gave some incentives. Digitalization is another thing which they are very bullish on, specifically the small businesses and startups. But let me ask this question to you, Daniel. In your region, what do you think? What are the major challenges, that the small businesses are facing right now?
Well, of course, there are immense challenges for businesses in general in sub-Saharan Africa, right? So when it comes to just the baseline infrastructure, right? You don't have any of the types of logistics services, the digital payment services that, of course, you can take advantage of in Europe and the US. And so that's a big reason why, my company, Sokowatch, which does free same-day delivery of goods to Kirana stores, to these mom and pop stores, over 30,000 of them now across 4 countries. We're actually in that sense building out the infrastructure ourselves to be able to do all of these things. I think with the pandemic, what we saw was a huge shift in the behavior of those businesses towards services like ours, where for the first time they are in fact ordering digitally. They're able to get their goods, with that free same-day delivery and continue trading and supplying their community with those essential goods. Now, I think the challenge is, how do we make sure that digitization continues? As I mentioned up front, where I get concerned is because for the first time, this 80-90% of the economy is actually kind of coming online, and as a result, they're actually kind of making their presence known. And as I said, I think it can be really easy, especially on the government side, to kind of look at that and say, whoa, we've seen this huge upsurge in digital payments. Let's add a tax to digital payments. And that type of thinking is, I think, totally off point because, previously there's no tax on making a cash payment, right? If you go to a Kirana, you buy, $5 worth of goods, there's no special tax for paying in cash at that Kirana. So why would you kind of inhibit the adoption of digital payments now for that $5 payment at the Kirana by adding on, a 10-cent tax to it? It's just nonsense. But because they're finally actually seeing the huge amount of money that's flowing in the space, they say, we need to get our cut of it. And I think that the right way to approach this longer term is to say, look, let's let the informal market naturally start to digitize and in a sense formalize over time. And then let's put in place sensible policies that actually make sense for these small businesses that reduce the barriers, remove the red tape so that it's easier for small businesses to be registered, to be compliant. There's not some maze of bureaucracy and all these things where you never know if you're in the right or you're in the wrong, and where corrupt officials can come in and take advantage of your small business. These kinds of things to kind of simplify and make the economic playground easier for everyone to make, rather than having all of these invisible rules that your small business owner is never going to be able to keep track of. So those are the big things to me that I really want to kind of support and lend my voice to when it comes to how I think especially emerging markets and regions like Africa can support the growth of small businesses.
I think that red tape part that you mentioned, I think that is true with all the countries, right? All the innovative businesses asking for the same thing from the government, right? They need that clear guidance from the government in terms of the policies, reduce a lot of license things and all. Naomi, considering your background, I'm sure you must be dealing with a lot of startups and the small businesses. How lucrative digital is specifically for the small businesses and startups? How are the startups and the small businesses actually leveraging digital, to scale up themselves or to build the future growth, future business models?
This is, I heard lately the term gift of the pandemic, which I really liked, because most gifts of the pandemic are very dire. But that one refers to the positive sides of the pandemic. And the positive side is that a lot of businesses, from the very tiny ones, the mom and pop shops, like Daniel mentioned, start to market their goods digitally. They start with either, a WhatsApp catalog or anything that taking photos with the phones of the products in the shop. This is the very, very, very basic of digitizing. But once they start getting a taste from the digital world and getting to new markets, they don't stop. And we've seen a lot of restaurants that, instead of closing up because of the pandemic, start deliver all kind of goods. We saw a huge boom in ice cream deliveries, because the spaces are of a very kind of little in Israel. We started seeing a lot of things that weren't shipped previously to the pandemic: desserts, ice creams, anything you can think of. I think this digital marketing boom that we're seeing is really helping a lot of businesses that are able to be agile, to cope, to move themselves from being very old style brick and mortar stores to having a digital presence really, really scale up in a very, I have all kinds of case studies for study cases, sorry, for the rest of our talk, but we're really seeing the digital both helping businesses to be more efficient, but mainly getting to more and more markets in Israel and out of Israel.
How many ice creams did you order?
I did. I don't want to reveal how many, because I have 2 daughters and we were very isolated, but we really...
Sure. Thank you on the softer note. But in fact, let me tell you, that's the answer I got from a lot of my panelists, because what happened is, in my previous sessions, now almost we are out of pandemic. We are on the threshold of, hoping that there won't be a third wave and you're almost out of the pandemic. But after the first wave, when I was moderating a session, I asked a couple of people, what is that one thing they are missing? He says ice cream. So that's the answer that I used to get from a lot of panelists. But good, thank you for adding that. And yes, I think pandemic is in a way a gift to the small businesses, because they digitize themselves really a lot. But again, when I'm saying that pandemic is also added a lot of new layers to the businesses which were already existing with the startups, the immediate question is there with the credit. And Thomas, I will shoot this question to you. Is credit seamless or easily available in your region, specifically for the small businesses, startups, fintechs? Why I think you can give the best answer here is because you're also dealing with the fintechs, which are now actually disbursing a lot of funds to the startups and the small business.
Let me start with saying that I can hear the regional differences. In Israel, it's ice cream. I think in Denmark, it was very much toilet paper. So, But so this is actually it's super interesting, and I think when you look at, and I only have the global numbers, and I looked a little bit into this, right? So if you look at SMEs, you kind of say, we say they're too small to serve to some of the financial institutions, but they're also too big to ignore. So on a global scale, I think the last number I saw was that SMEs actually make up 20% of the global banking revenue, right? But it's also a segment that has, in some terms, before COVID hit, was neglected by the established industry, right? So we have a big portion, like 99% of European businesses, Danish businesses, are SMEs. They make up 20% of revenue, neglected before COVID, and then COVID hit. And as you know, the biggest accelerator of digitalization, that has been COVID, right? So all of a sudden we see a super interesting, because if you look at the Nordic countries, there's a highly digitized infrastructure, and that's maybe where we differ a bit. There's a highly digitized infrastructure to build on. Open banking, and also getting people access to data from the banks, is actually very progressed, and access to public data is actually also really good. So if you combine easy access to banking data, easy access to public data, a highly digitized infrastructure, now we're beginning to see that the SME field is the new battlefield for financial technology. So we're beginning to see a lot of new models coming out, a lot of new challenger banks focusing on the SME segment, applying technology to actually reach that last mile of clients that the established sector didn't really serve. Seeing new ways of attracting capital, fundraising, lending. So that is fueled by open banking to some extent. Factoring, the old factoring model is getting into fashion again. We are seeing cloud accounting systems where when the small and medium-sized business send an invoice, all the credit scoring is done up front, and if it's good business, then you get a button and you press pay me now. So you don't have to wait like 60 or 90 days, and you get your money now. You're seeing revenue-based funding or financing of small and medium-sized business, of FinTech, where you start projecting from all the data you have from various sources, and start basing your funding on that. So that's also something we can see where venture funds are starting to look also as another alternative, and startups are looking to as another alternative. So we see a lot of different models. We see like new ways of embedding salary system, new ways, pension, financing, getting access to working capital, all that. The last count we did just in Denmark was we're counting 100+ different solutions that are especially targeting the SMEs. So I think the access to credit is very much fueled by technology, and many new different players that are coming into this field and want a piece of the pie, and actually realizing that it's easier than they thought, because there's a lot of these businesses that are hungry for growth. So it's extremely interesting at the moment.
There's a funny problem in Israel, and funny in the sense that we laugh in order not to cry, that there's a huge amount of FinTech companies based in Israel that started in Israel, and that because of laws and regulatory bodies, they prevent them from entering the local market. So they're huge and small, and any size of FinTech companies based in Israel, started in Israel, and can't serve the local market because the regulations cannot, they don't grant access to banking accounts right now. We're seeing a shift right now, but it's still a conundrum. It's a problem.
Sure, I think Sean, thanks for that comment, Naomi. I think the regulatory challenges everywhere, specifically with the fintechs. I think there are no clear guidance or the regulations which the central banks have crafted specifically for the fintechs. They created a lot of sandboxes, but I don't think there are policies which the central banks have crafted specifically for the fintechs. So Daniel, you heard Thomas and Naomi both. We spoke about the access to credit. the small businesses will not flourish until and unless they get the credit, seamlessly, right? So how's the situation there in your region? Are the fintechs, partnering with small businesses? Are the small businesses getting credit, seamlessly?
I think both a hugely untapped, but also at the moment hugely promising space. We've seen for actually in just the past 6 months alone, 3 new unicorn companies come up in Africa for the first time, and that's 3 new ones to add to a total of 1 previously. So it's a huge development that you can just see the pace of the ecosystem rapidly growing here. And interestingly, all 3 of those are actually fintech companies dealing with payments in some form, peer-to-peer merchant, and of course, a lot of them are now starting to do financing in some way, shape, or form. And I think it's hugely needed, because if you look at the actual banked population in almost all of the markets in sub-Saharan Africa, it's less than 20%. It's crazy. And then you look at specifically informal businesses, so the ones that we work with, and in some cases it's even worse. So you're running a business. You have a turnover, could be over $1,000 a month. But you don't have a bank account. You don't even have a business license, because it's just like too difficult to set this stuff up. And even if you did have a business account with the bank, they wouldn't do anything for you. All they would do is just charge you high fees as a place to put your money. It just makes no sense. And just as an example, for us, we're an e-commerce company, but we've actually gotten into doing finance for the Kiranas, for the mom and pop stores that we supply with our products. And we've been doing that.
Shoot another question to you, Naomi, and I think we'll proceed further. As and when he joins back, we'll repeat that question with him. So Naomi, then tell me one thing, considering the current situation where digital is at the forefront, what is it that you think the fintechs, or specifically the startups and the small businesses, should do, to achieve the future growth far more aggressively?
First and foremost, I'm a bit biased about this question, because what my company does is basically digital matchmaking. We match the right digital marketer for small businesses. So I think one of the most important things is finding a very good digital marketing expert, because A, there are a lot of experts out there aren't really experts, and B, the field is changing daily, hourly. And you've got to have someone that is on top of things and can help you move towards those democratizing tools. Like I started with WhatsApp catalog that allowed very small businesses, mom and pop shops, like Daniel said, to take photos or use the agent's photos and upload them very, very easily to a WhatsApp catalog, and able to, when they contact or get in contact with their different customers, show just pictures and description from the catalog. And it sounds very small, you could have sent a picture way back, but once it's a catalog and it's got the descriptions and prices and all the information, we've seen that just this tiny thing actually scaled up a lot of businesses, because it made marketing way more efficient. They could get the customers to look at the catalog or look at specific parts of the catalog first before talking to them, and help them achieve more and more audiences. So even the tiny bit that some people just don't exist can help scale up just a little bit. And we go from there to all the new technologies that really helps any kind of small business, from those tiny shops to startups, very technology startups, to get to know their audience better and to understand what are the audience's pain point and desires in order to market goods way more efficiently and to look at their marketing funnels in a new and innovative way. And that, I think, from my biased view, is one of the most important things for small and medium businesses to achieve in order to grow, to find a very good digital marketer and be open to the new digital tools.
Daniel, can you give us your own experience? How are you, building yourself or scaling up yourself with the digital? How are you leveraging digital in terms of, building the whole ecosystem and gaining more out of it?
Absolutely. So with Sokowatch, really all of the customers that we work with are using e-commerce for the first time ever. So these kiranas, these mom and pop stores, never previously had ever ordered from any type of digital system. So when we come in and we actually take a very high touch approach to introducing these shops to e-commerce, because of course, you can imagine you go to a small corner store that's just selling rice, sugar, toilet paper, whatever, and you say, hey, instead of you having to leave your store, go into town to a wholesaler, buy goods, all that, you can just press a few buttons and it's going to be delivered to you in 2 hours free of charge. They think it's some kind of scam, right? So you have to actually kind of take them on and say, oh, no, this is real. Like, just try it out. Hey, this is actually why we do the free delivery and all this is because if we tried to charge the fees on it, all stuff, they wouldn't believe us, right? And they would never try it. So we try to make the barrier to entry as easy as possible. We even do payment on delivery, right? And even in a lot of our markets, still cash on delivery. And like, we take care of the digitization through, cash in with different agent networks and stuff on our side. So kind of making these barriers to entry as easy as possible for the informal businesses that currently dominate in Africa has been kind of our way of helping introduce them digital. And then over time, once you've introduced them to the digital ordering interface, then it becomes much easier to transition them to digital payments, to transition them to doing buy now, pay later through our, which is in effect, digital financing through our ordering system, and any number of other products and services that we also have planned as well.
Okay, so basically you have to inculcate the habit of digital first into the customers, and then you can maybe get them used to be on the digital platform. I think interesting idea. I think that's what is happening in India as well. A lot of e-commerce companies are doing that. But I sometimes find it really complex, because now my banks wants to become a red hailing company, and the red hailing company wants to become a bank, and then the bank wants to become a food delivery company, and the food delivery company has already partnered with an insurance company, right? So it's pretty complex, but I think at least there is a lot of innovation. That's what I can see. Thomas, you understand? Yeah, please go ahead, Naomi. You want to add something?
I think what Daniel spoke about, lowering the barriers, is one of the major trends in digital technology, in marketing technology, that really democratizing the small businesses, because these are technologies that used to be reachable only to bigger companies. And the fact that the barriers are lowering as a trend in all technologies, in social commerce, in Facebook or TikTok shops, in all sorts of in anything you can think about as creator economy, really gives access to small, tiny, medium businesses that 2 years ago didn't have access to, and that's really democratizing, because it levels the competition a bit. A site of a huge company will still look better than a site by a small or medium business, because the budget is way higher. But a Facebook shop or a TikTok shop or any kind of social commerce app makes the competition way leveler, because they give access to the same technology to everybody the same.
Okay. Noted your points, Naomi. Thank you for adding that. Thomas, what I wanted to ask you is, you understand the challenges and the changes which is happening in the small businesses. You also know the FinTech story really well, which wants to partner with this side of people, the small businesses and the startups. If I ask you specifically, what kind of changes the regulator should do? What kind of policies regulator should bring? I mean, if you could highlight maybe 3-4 bullet points, which will actually help small businesses to reach to a next level.
So this discussion actually, let me try to answer from two angles. So there's the obvious one. So that is about red tape, of course, and you know, for small businesses, red tape is a huge challenge. Of course, for some of, you know, that's a challenge for some, and for others, it's actually an opportunity, and also especially for some of the companies that we're working with within financial technology to actually reduce some of that red tape and work with some of the different sources of data to actually make their businesses more efficient and make the interactions with government regulators and so on and so forth way easier and yeah, less painful. I think what this discussion also made me think of was because we talk about, you know, how do we sell more stuff, how do we consume more stuff, and how do we grow, which basically, and I think the conversation we have right now in the very much in the Nordics, and which is probably also there's a historic reason for that, but it's how do we, and there's a lot of cliches around that, build back better, the green recovery, all that kind of stuff. But I think what we see right now in a very concrete way is where financial, because creating the incentives for actually making that change, so building a more sustainable business as a small and medium-sized business. And it's not only about the environment, this is the ESG. So it's the E, obviously, but it's also the S and the G. So how do we empower small and medium-sized businesses to be part of that transformation and build a more, because there's a huge opportunity. And I think that's what we're seeing here, that there's a race, those that get it, those that get that I need to transform my business, I need to go digital, but I also need to transform my business towards a more sustainable business. And that's both on the E and the S and the G, right? And then those that fundamentally doesn't get it. And I think what we can see here, that incentive has to very much come from the financial industry, because they are the ones that can direct either investments into the right companies, or also steer them so that there's both the carrot and the stick. And it's also about like making financing cheaper for those businesses that actually are in that transformation. And I think that's when we're seeing, and there's a huge demand for one, having that conversation, two, for solutions that direct investments and price loans, financing towards the most sustainable solutions. And so we can accelerate that movement. And there's a huge opportunity for those businesses that understand that and tap into that, both in the fintech space, but very much also in general. And that is also accelerated by new technologies and financial technologies especially. And I think that is super interesting right now. And we need to make that change. I think all reports coming out right now, we can see it with all the problems. And that's, you know, no matter what region you are, you're affected by this, right? So we need to make that change. And finance is underpinning every industry, and they are the ones that can create that incentive to make that change.
Okay. Daniel, do you also want to add here on what Thomas said? Because my question is also the same to you as well. What kind of changes do you think that the policymakers should make, or what kind of changes they should adopt specifically to boost or empower the small businesses?
Yes, so I think on the policymaker side, the biggest things is not adding toll taxes, right? It's very easy, when you build a bridge, when you build a road, you say, aha, we want to make money. We're gonna put up a toll block. We're gonna make everybody stop and pay $1 to use it. But the reality is that the economic harm that you do by implementing that barrier, implementing that tax, implementing that fee, actually reduces by far the economic value of that road, of that bridge, as a result of you coming in and putting in that fee right in the middle. And the same that goes for that physical infrastructure applies to the digital infrastructure as well. So I mentioned this earlier. When it's things like mobile payments, when it's things like access to even data. It's quite interesting. In some African countries, they've started putting special taxes on buying data bundles, buying internet bundles. Can you imagine a more economically damaging thing to do, right? To actually increase the cost and the barrier of going online. It's just so short-sighted in terms of you know, the kinds of things that a government can do. And so I think what we need to encourage and kind of build up, you know, when it comes to working governments, especially in emerging markets, is, you know, you need to take the long view on your infrastructure, and the infrastructure has to include both the physical roads and bridges, but also the digital roads and bridges. And you can't add barriers, can't add fees to that now, because if you do that, you're actually just harming yourself in the long term by reducing the possible size of your economy, because the economy of the future is not just going to be the physical economy. It's going to be more and more, and in fact, at some point in probably every market, in every country in the world, the majority of the economy. And so that's what I would specifically say, you know, from my vantage point, working out of sub-Saharan Africa.
Okay, noted your points, Daniel. So I think we discussed the changes, we discussed the challenges, we discussed what kind of changes will require to, you know, boost the small businesses. I think 3-4 very different segments that we touched in last, I think, more than 35 minutes that we have been discussing. Let me take one more question with all of you, and I think that should be my last question, because otherwise the watch is already ticking. And Naomi, I will start with you. So considering what we discussed, we all need to see, you know, that small businesses should grow. We all need to see that. We all need to see that there should be a lot of MSMEs, SMEs, you know, should grow. In fact, you know, the tycoon from China, or the, what you can say, the founder of Alibaba, Alipay, and Financial, Jack Ma once said that, you know, the next decade is not going to be with the billionaires, but it's going to be with the millionaires, or the small businesses. The companies will not have a lot of billions of dollars, but the companies will be smaller in size, and a lot of startups will be driven. Considering all this, you know, forecast, my question to all of you is, how do you see the small businesses phase shifting or changing in next 3 to 5 years? What are the major changes that you see will happen in this space going ahead? Naomi.
I think the next revolution in digital has started already, and I'm referring to social commerce. I want to tell you a story, but instead of talking about a huge global trend, I want to tell a tiny story. We had as a customer a very little jeweler shop in Old Acre. Acre is a very old city with the longest active port in the world, 7,000 years of an active port. And there used to be a lot of tourists coming to Acre, and a lot of the artists and the jeweler there earn their living by selling jewels and art to people coming in to see the magic of Acre. So they had a lot of problem coping with COVID because they're not tourists. And without the experience of Acre, why would you buy this specific piece of jewelry? And this young and talented jeweler decided to open both an Instagram and a TikTok shop, where she takes people to tiny little tours in Acre and shows them and tell them very spicy stories about the places, about Andromeda Rock, about the port, and they get to experience this tiny experience with her. And then she presents the piece of earring or necklace that is connected very strongly to this experience. And she started selling. I can't begin to describe how her business boomed by selling differently, by selling to markets all over the world and in Israel with an experience that wasn't available before, because she lays on social commerce, on the fact that people can see her through either Instagram or TikTok, have the experience, and once they experienced it, can directly click on the earring, go to the Instagram shop and buy it instantly, seamlessly. And that has revolutionized not just her jewelry shop, but e-commerce. E-commerce is, I believe, going to be social commerce in the next decade, because it grants way easier access to customers and to buying and it's democratizing. It's levels the terrain of competition to small and medium businesses that can take their audiences to any kind of experience, and they can compete way easier with the giants that they couldn't compete with beforehand. And we're seeing it as a trend all over the world. I see it in Israel. I'm sure you're seeing it in your places as well.
So I think you added a social commerce part to the e-commerce. I think sounds really interesting. I have been struggling hard to increase my followers on Instagram because I'm giving a tough competition to my nephew. I thought I will do that, but I'm absolutely unsuccessful there. He's a teenager, but still he has a great followers there on Instagram. But I think
the network that suits you.
yes, I think, but that's a valid point. Instagram and TikTok, I think you mentioned that. So Thomas, I will shift the focus to you and we'll take your perspective also. What do you think will be the big changes in next 3 to 5 years specifically in this sector?
I think the story that I was just told was really great illustration of, so I very much agree. I think to put a little bit back about it, is a little bit of an elimination run, right? So I think that coming back to my previous point, that either you get it or you don't, and you get left behind. So there's a lot of small businesses that really need to catch up. We can see that on all statistics here in that the small businesses need to take a critical look at their business and find out how can I digitize it. There's a lot of talk about like going global and like e-commerce, but I think one thing COVID also taught us was an interesting thing was that communities also matter. So the local aspect actually also matters. So also needing to figure out like in what context am I relevant? Am I relevant in a global context? Am I relevant, and how maybe am I even more relevant in a community context? Digital is not a question. It's just it's how and getting started. And then the third point is we need to figure out, and small medium-sized business need to figure out, how do we do it in the most sustainable way, where we don't we don't only talk about increasing profits, but we do it in a sustainable way where we talk about people and people and planet also, in order, because otherwise it doesn't, essentially it doesn't matter. 10-20 years down the road, if we create a planet where we cannot live, it doesn't really matter. So there's the global trends of figuring out how we truly build back better, and it's not only about the environment. It's about how we do it in an overall sustainable way, where we don't harm like biodiversity, people, and we think that into our businesses from the core. And I think that's going to be super important. And I think we see a lot of small businesses taking those small baby steps right now and incorporating that in their business model.
Great. Noted your points, Thomas. Daniel, your perspective.
Yeah, I think Thomas made some great points there about what is the local context, and what is the community context of the SME and who you're serving. So in our context, the Kirana store is not going away. You're never going to have a situation where somebody needs to buy 1 bar of soap and they're going to go order it online and wait 3 days to get the soap delivered. This kind of traditional divide between e-commerce and physical retail commerce that maybe we thought about 5-10 years ago, that is clearly not the case anymore. And so I think moving forward, what I would expect to see in our space, which is the kind of hyper local retail for the emerging markets, is a blending of the two, where you will still have a local corner shop, you will still have that little kiosk just down the road, but that kiosk, that shopkeeper will be using digital tools. They'll be using all sorts of things in order to enable their business, whether it's getting access to digital credit, whether it's ordering their goods, whether it's selling to customers as well, where they can sell to people without the consumer actually having to come physically to the store, and then they have some kind of last mile delivery that they're able to use as well. But this kind of blending of retail, I think, is something that's going to be hugely game changing, especially in emerging markets over the next 10-20 years. And I'm really excited to see what comes out of it.
Okay, noted your points, Daniel. I think that was really truly amazing for me, in fact, listening to three different perspectives from three different regions, I guess. And I'm sure the participants, the delegates, those who are attending this show specifically, ET Global Town Hall, will also enjoy. I think the points that you guys, the points that all of you raised were really remarkable and I think relevant as well. The case study that you showcased, Naomi, I think is truly important because I think the small businesses are looking at Instagram and TikTok or the social commerce far more aggressively. So thank you so much, Naomi. Thank you so much, Daniel, and thank you so much, Thomas, for sharing your perspective and taking part into democratization of small businesses session here at the Economic Times Global Town Hall. Thank you so much.